What's up, guys? Welcome to Daily Dose of Reddit. This is your host, Zach, and today's subreddit is r/EntitledParents. This story's called, I ruined Entitled Dad's Christmas by being honest with him, and then he lies to my family about what I said. Over the past 2 months, my relationship with my dad has been severely damaged. He has a real anger problem, and with both my brothers having moved out, and him being divorced for 18 years, the only target left is me. He isn't abusive, but he'll often start yelling at me and getting angry for something as small as not having something to talk about with him. It eventually led to a breaking point the day after Thanksgiving. Me and my dad are sitting in the living room, me on his laptop, which he never uses and only I do, and him on his phone. I guess it's time to motivate, huh? He'll say this over 10 times before he actually does anything. Even if I get up and get ready to do stuff, he'll just sit there on his phone for another half an hour. I look at him, waiting to see if he'll actually get up. Entitled Dad looks at me, face suddenly fills up with anger, and he says in a pissed off voice, "So you're not gonna help me, huh?" I never said that. It says so on your face. What are you talking about? After everything I've done for you, this is how you freaking treat me, right? I facepalm and lean on the table, tired of dealing with this kind of stuff daily. He proceeds to go on a 10-minute rant where he calls me ungrateful, entitled, thinking I have all the answers, etc. He goes to his room and begins to smoke pot, California, while continuing his rant. After a few minutes of ranting in his room, he comes back into the living room. Entitled Dad, still pissed, "I'm going to his friend's house with the dog. If those dishes aren't done by the time I get back, there's gonna be hell to pay." He walks out and I break down crying because of the stress of living with him. After thinking for a few minutes, I decide I've had enough of his BS and that I'm gonna see if I can come to her house for a while so I can get some space. I call her and she says I can come over, but she can't pick me up. I don't have a license. I then call one of my older brothers, Carl, and ask if he can take me to our mom's. He knows what our dad's like, so he agrees. My dad tries to call me later that night when he realizes I'm not home, but I just text him that I'm fine and at mom's and blow him off for the rest of the night. The next day, I call him and the call doesn't go well. He proceeds to yell at me, call me ungrateful, entitled, thinking I have all the answers, etc. The call goes on like that for about 15 minutes before I finally manage to get him to say goodbye. Not wanting to deal with that again, I blow him off for the rest of November and the first half of December. During this time, I talk with Carl and my aunt B about my dad, and they both think I made the right call. About midway through December, my mom makes me call my dad and organize for me to be with him for the day. During the call, he calls me ungrateful, entitled, thinking I have all the answers, etc. After I hang up, the stress gets to me and I have a legitimate breakdown because of him. When my mom sees that, we talked for a little bit, and she says that she didn't realize how bad it was and that she's not going to force me to go with him. I then text my dad and politely explain that I'm not coming because I don't want to argue with him or have a breakdown. Safe to say, he wasn't happy, but I turned back to ignoring him for a while. Then comes Christmas. Both my brothers, Carl and Dave, ask me if I'm coming to my dad's on Christmas Day, where it'd just be me, our dad, my brothers, and their families. I say no and tell them to please pass that on to our dad since I still don't want to talk to him. However, on the 27th, we were having a large Christmas at Aunt B's house along with our aunts, uncles, cousins, etc. And I tell them I'm coming to that Christmas. The 27th comes and Dave picks me up and we arrive at Aunt B's house where us and Dave's family were thankfully the first ones there. Slowly, the family begins arriving, including some of our younger cousins. I'm really good with kids, so I usually volunteer to watch the cousins, so me and my cousins and my 2-year-old nephew head out front. Thankfully, Aunt B lives across from a cul-de-sac, and the street itself is really quiet, with it being a circle with only one entrance. After a few minutes, one of my adult cousins, Joe, walks out where we talk for a few minutes, while watching the kids when my dad pulls up. Dave goes to help grab stuff from the truck and I follow. When I walk up to my dad's truck, he calmly tells me that we're gonna have a talk later. A few minutes later, everybody's back inside, and my dad asks me to step out front with him. Once outside, he again calls me ungrateful, entitled, thinking I have all the answers, etc., and doesn't give me a chance to defend myself. After a few few minutes where he slowly began yelling at me, he says he's leaving. Just then, Carl pulls up and my dad goes to talk with him while I head back inside and have a breakdown in the laundry room. After I call down, I talk to Aunt B, Dave, and Carl, who walked in during my breakdown, and they all said I did the right thing. That should be the end, but no, it's not. Fast forward an hour and my dad realizes he forgot his ice chest at Aunt B's house and comes back to get it. Once he gets there, some family members that don't know about what's going on between us ask him to stay for dinner and presents, to which he eventually agrees. After presents are opened, I'm out front again, watching and playing with my cousins and their new gifts when my dad calls me over. OP, I'm sorry about earlier. Can you just tell me why you're upset? Me, relieved and hoping he'll see reason. My problem is that you get angry too easily and too often. That's it? Yeah. So you're calling me a butthole? What? No, I didn't say that. I'm the one that needs to change, huh? You're Mr. Perfect, Mr. Never Wrong. Now I'm angry. Shut up about that! I know I'm not perfect and that I don't have all the answers. But you do, Dad, and you're unwilling to sit down and admit it. Oh, that's exactly what your mom said when she walked out on us. You even used the same words. Hell, she probably told you what to say. Me, trying to keep from getting angrier. Of course I'd use the same words as she does. She raised me half the time. Bull crap, she wasn't there for 1.5 years. During their divorce proceedings, our dad had full custody, but our mom still picked us up for weekends and we still spent plenty of time with her. I'm the only one that raised you, and now you're treating me like this. Me resisting the urge to yell, I'm done with this. I turn around and walk away. It's your freaking decision, Bigfoot. He then turns and goes into Aunt B's house. Carl had been watching from a distance, and when our dad went inside, he walked over to talk to me. I vent to him for a few minutes until I calmed down and we walked to Aunt B's driveway. Dave was watching the children from there, and the three of us brothers talked for a few minutes, mostly about our dad, when we hear the door behind us open and our dad yells, "This butthole is leaving!" at me. He couldn't hear us talking, he was too far away. He then walks to and gets into his truck, does a freaking burnout, and then speeds off. A few minutes later, Joe and his brother walk out and meet up with us. Then they say that my dad told them I said, "You're such a butthole," and to kiss my ass. For the next hour, I went around talking to family members asking what they heard. Thankfully, everybody said that they didn't believe I'd tell my dad that since I'm an extremely polite person. On top of all this, my dad is currently holding on to all my mail, over a month's worth. I've asked him politely to give it to Carl, and then Carl would give it to me, but he refuses. This is really bad since I'm joining the US Army and I'm leaving on January 14th. I'm writing this on the 4th, and I need to activate my Navy Federal account, but the info I need is in that mail. I've been dealing with my dad my entire life, but these past few years, and especially this past half a year, has been the hardest. I honestly just want to cut him out of my life at this point until he's actually willing to listen. I'm open to advice on anything, whether it be that you think I'm the butthole, ideas to repair our relationship, or to get my mail. Any help is appreciated. Okay, buddy, here's what I think. Okay, if you've already tried talking to him peacefully and that hasn't worked, then what I think you should do is be like, hey dude, you need to chill out and think about how you're treating your own child, because whatever's going on here is really affecting me mentally and emotionally, and if I'm doing something wrong, you need to tell me, but tell me calmly, and we can work out how we can fix how crappy we are to each other. This story's called Entitled Stepdad Thinking He Has the Right to Insult His Stepdaughter on a Full Plane. So, this happened about 3 years ago. At the time, I was struggling a lot with anxiety, so I am very proud of standing up to this person. First, a bit of pretext. Me and my family were flying away for the holiday. One of those flights where you have an 8-hour layover in another airport between planes. Most of the people on our plane were doing the same thing, so it's fair to assume everyone is going to be cranky and tired. It was the second plane. I'm sat down in my seat, absolutely exhausted, and my family get on in front of us. It's obvious they had been having a little argument already, as they all seemed tense. From later in the conversation, I gathered that it was a mom, her 2 children, and their stepdad, or something akin to that. The people of note are me, stepdad, teen girl, my dad, my sister. If I had to guess, I'd say teen girl was no older than 15, which happened to be my sister's age. While they were sitting down, teen girl made an offhand comment about not wanting to sit next to stepdad, I assume due to a previous argument. He made a snide comment about how rude she was being, and as the seating turned out, she ended up sitting next to him. They bicker for a little while, and then stepdad stands up to put his bag in the overhead compartment. At this point, I look away to the in-flight entertainment system and exchange a look with my sister as if to say, "Can't these people shut up?" It's at this point where stepdad loses it. He starts yelling and shouting about how teenage girls slapped him. It's worth noting that I didn't hear any slap, and nobody I asked saw or heard anything either. So if teen girl did indeed hit him, it certainly wasn't hard or in any way warranting this reaction. He goes on a tirade, calling teen girl a bitch and saying how she can't respect anyone. The mother is being strangely silent, which makes me assume stepdad got like this a lot. After a while, you could hear teen girl quietly sobbing from this barrage of insults and occasionally whimpering, "Please stop." Now, if it had ended there, I wouldn't have interfered. Sure, they both made mistakes, but like I said, we were all tired and cranky on this plane, so I chalked it up to that. The issue is, it didn't end there. Every few minutes, the stepdad would make a comment akin to what the barrage was before, usually directly insulting teen girl. Every time this happened, teen girl would start sobbing again. She wasn't arguing anymore and was clearly very upset. Stepdad was being loud enough that the whole plane compartment would have been able to hear him. I was trying to ignore it when stepdad, in a super aggressive voice, tells teen girl, "You better not ever hit me again, you floozy." This is where I decided enough was enough. Partly bothered by instinct kicking in for this girl who was the same age as my sister, and partly due to sheer grouchiness and tiredness. My usual anxiety-ridden self piped up with a somewhat nervous, "Excuse me, sir." No response, so I try again, this time actually putting force into my words. "Sir, excuse me." My sister tapped him. She had to stand up to do it, and he turned around. I look him in the eye and say, "I'm sure you're tired, but this plane isn't the place to be arguing like that, and you should never use that language against someone like her. Would you mind keeping it down for everyone else on this plane?" Stepdad glared at me. I could see him thinking of a response when he finally replied with, "This is my family. I do as I want. What happens between my family is my business, and you shouldn't get involved." This would have been a valid point if he hadn't been raising his voice on this packed plane. I calmly replied with, "It's your family, but you are making it everyone's business by constantly insulting teen girl. Can't you act more appropriately?" He replied with, "My family, my business. I don't care about the surroundings." After that, he turned around and didn't say any more, that I could hear at least, until a few hours later. It was a long flight. At this point, my dad had confirmed that I had done the right thing, and I had assumed the matter to be over and done with. Teen girl had stopped crying, and stepdad had stopped insulting her. However, stepdad had been ordering quite a few whiskeys. When he was drunk enough, or had thought of something to say, he got out of his seat, walked over to me, and leaned in all up in my face, leaning over my sister, I might add. I could smell the alcohol on him, so I knew this was going to be interesting. "You had no right to talk to me like that earlier. You have no clue what I've been through, and she's been being a bench for the whole journey." This was apparently the best he could do as a response to me, even after all that time to think. He said more about how he didn't care about the rest of the plane, how it was his business and nobody else should have been listening, but honestly, I was a little nervous and so I don't remember it too well. My dad then stepped in for me, noticing how uncomfortable I was. My dad ended up saying almost exactly what I was thinking. "We've all been through things on this flight and none of us appreciated your arguing. You made a mistake, now own it." Stepdad mumbled something about it being his right to discipline his stepdaughter and walked away. Personally, I don't think calling someone a floozy is disciplining. I just think that's borderline abuse, especially because of how the mother seemed to be either too scared to step in or used to the whole charade happening. My sister later overheard other passengers talking about how they were super glad somebody stepped in and shut stepdad up. The stepdad kept drinking more, and at one point almost fell over while walking to the toilet. He also, on another trip to the toilet, randomly offered me a high five? I have no idea why he did this. I can only assume the alcohol told him it was a good way to try and avoid future arguments. The plane landed and I never saw him again. While the stepdad was definitely entitled as all hell, assuming he could blast insults at his stepdaughter without any regard for fellow passengers or common human decency, I'm honestly more worried about what could have happened in the future. The more I look back, the more I've worried that stepdad was an abusive person. After all, normal people don't ever call their family members floozies. If somehow the girl who was insulted reads this, I hope things are better now. Man, that's really sad. It's sad because this is not an uncommon thing with step-parents. If you have a kid and you marry someone and your spouse ends up being a jerk to your kids, you need to boot them, okay? Seriously, your kids come before anyone else. I don't care who the hell you think you are. If your spouse is a jerk to your children, you need to make it stop. I don't care how. Yell at them, slap him, divorce him, shoot him in the damn face. I don't care. And if you're worried that they'll retaliate in any other way, you can get help, okay? A lot of people would be willing to put trash like that in their place. The police especially. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to never miss an episode.